Welcome to the 2000 Cubit Rule. I am your host, Mark Rowan, and we have another great episode here on this podcast where we have conversations with amazing guests who are making room for God to move in their business, their ministry, and their life. And we just want to remind everyone that SheepFeast is here to help disciple your business through a Christian business CRM. So don't forget about that. But enough about us. Today we have a wonderful guest who is with us. I met Jacob not too long ago and had an initial conversation, but really excited to have Jacob Dyke on us with today. And he is the founder of Anchored Coaching. And we're delighted to have you, Jacob. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, it's a beautiful day down here in sunny Florida. Enjoying a little bit of cooler weather, which is not usual down here.
Yeah, it is definitely very cool here. I think we were in the 20s last night, but we're surviving and excited to have this conversation. Jacob, you weren't born a coach, and we hear about coaches a lot in today's world, like probably 20 some years ago when I started out in the workforce and working with businesses. You didn't hear as much about them, so we can talk a little bit about what that means from your perspective. But how did you kind of get yourself into coaching?
Yeah, great question. So I started off my career as a high school football coach and teacher, and I quickly realized that the time I was spending away from my new wife and not being compensated for it just wasn't really what I was looking to do. So started looking around, and I stumbled into a tech startup, and it was it was a wild ride. I really learned in that kind of quick experience of being the fourth hire in this startup of that I loved entrepreneurship. I loved building people up and had no idea how that was going to intersect in the future. So I spent the next several years trying to figure out what God wanted to do with my life in the world of entrepreneurship and was really struggling. And it wasn't until a good friend of mine said, Jacob, go get some help, that I went and actually found a coach. And the coach was a believer, excuse me. And for the first time in my career, he helped me set a clear vision for where I wanted to go and find those small achievable steps to get there. And so that was my introduction into coaching. He helped me find a home in people operations, working in a different startup. And then he ultimately inspired me to go get trained by the same organization that he was, which kind of culminating all of these different experiences together led to the launch of Anchor Coaching.
Beautiful. I had to touch on the football piece because last night was the national championship. You're in Florida. I don't know if you were rooting for Miami or not. I know there's a lot of great football schools in Florida, but did you catch that game last night?
I caught bits and pieces of it. I am a Tennessee fan by blood, not by choice. Most of my family's in Knoxville, so I was disappointed that we weren't there, and so I spent more of my time checking in. But I did see the end of the game where Indiana had that incredible touchdown, and just kind of plowed ahead. And what an underdog story to build up a program from the depths of college football and into a national champion. It was an exciting time for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I know that story itself. I'm sure there's a lot of gold that people can pull out of like just how they, went from, if people are like watching this and like, I don't care about football. Well, it's really a historic moment because Indiana was like one of the worst football schools ever. And, over
Hmm.
the last 2 years, they become a powerhouse essentially in a pretty short amount of time. So, um, thinking about that, like you started out in this football coaching world and now you're coaching
No.
businesses and leaders. What are some of the do you see some parallels to what you did, like coaching high school kids and now what you're doing in the business world?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a difference, partly because as a coach in high school, a lot of what it is like, hey, I'm going to tell you exactly what to do, and if you follow what I do, then you're going to largely make plays. You're going to play on the field. trust me as your coach because I know. But as a coach for business, the knowledge expert is about your situation is actually the client. They understand the feelings, the thoughts, the experiences that have all led to them in this moment. And so in a lot of ways, I am someone who's walking alongside you, helping draw out awareness and insight so that hey, this is where I'm going. Okay, let's have accountability in the action steps that you're setting or that we collaboratively set together. So less of a dictative relationship and more of a collaborative relationship. So a little bit of a difference there, but certainly the ultimate goal comes or for coaching is to move somebody forward. The word coach comes from a carriage, a coach. You used to take a coach to move from one place to another. And so in either circumstances, you're still moving, whether it's a player or a business leader, closer to the goals that they set.
Beautiful. Yeah, we had a conversation with the coach last week as well. I think this is the coaching season for people. And so brought up some of the same ideas about, we don't know everything about the business itself, but we have some great tools and some principles and things like that we can help you with. And even I think about it in the football world, like a coach can't know and experience everything a player because there's so many players right on the field. Like if you think about football,
Hmm.
that coach is a lot of times he's coaching people that are better at what they're doing than he is, but he's got the perspective that's different, right? And
Right. Yeah. When you're so close to it, you can't see the forest from the trees. You don't see sometimes just what's directly in front of you. And business leaders a lot of time are spending so much time working in their business. They have no time to spend working on their business. And is this work that I'm doing actually aligned with where I want to take this place? And so having someone who's an objective um, partner that just ultimately wants what's best for you or cares about you and your well-being and that you're actually moving towards your goals can be helpful to just see a little bit of a different perspective.
yeah, I love that. I wanted to kind of dive in a little bit about the name of your business, Anchored
Hmm.
Coaching. So, how did you come out land on that particular brand?
Yeah, it's actually kind of a funny story. So earlier in the year when I was going to launch Anchor Coaching, it wasn't necessarily planned to launch the way that I had, it wasn't like this long-term thing of like, oh man, it's now come, I'm 6 months out, I'm going to start slowly getting prepared to launch. No, there wasn't, there was a vague sense that I wanted to have my own business one day, but I didn't know I was going to launch Anchor Coaching. I was spending time with God, and I had this sense that the next season that I was going to enter into was one where I was going to be in a boat and that there was a storm raging and that I was anchored, but God was calling me to cut anchor and just go ride the storm, and that He was going to place me where He wanted me. And lo and behold, a little bit later that year, we had a number of things happen. Whether it was my house flooding, and there were some personal things going on at the same time. There was a career shakeup, and obviously launching Anchor Coaching at the same time. Like all of those things happened in this short period of time that really felt like God was propelling me into it, less so than deliberately planning it, which hindsight, um, would have liked to have deliberately planned a little bit more. But, I'm here now. And so very grateful to God. God has carried me through that.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I would keep saying this, but it's so true. Man has plans, but God orders the steps. And so
That's right.
I actually responded on a LinkedIn post from someone else uh, relating those kind of same ideas. Like you think about at the beginning of the year, we got sales projections and what's our projected earnings and all these things, and you use all the information and data that you have access to try to make a best guess of what's going to happen, but honestly, you have no idea what's going to happen.
That's right.
But you do your best with that information, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, as Christian believers and our Christian business people and leaders, that you really have to lean into the wisdom of the Lord, and sometimes the wisdom of the Lord is finding a coach that'll help us. You mentioned the house flooding. It made me think of speaking of LinkedIn, like do you find that these things that happen to you, God will use them as things that you integrate into your coaching, like a LinkedIn post? 5 things I learned about getting your house flooded and how's that relates to business, whatever. How's that been, as you begin to coach people and lead people in that way?
Yeah, definitely personal experiences come into play. There's understanding context of, hey, I've walked a similar journey to you, or I've experienced, something a little bit different, or hey, I've actually been a little bit further along than you. And so sometimes being able to bring that context is really helpful. But and then even just running my own business, I knew I was a good coach launching Anchor Coaching, but I learned that I was not a good business owner when I first started. And so understanding what it takes now, looking back from when I started, of man, I had so many things wrong, things that I thought were important weren't, and things that I now know that are important, I wasn't doing at all. And so there's just a lot of personal experiences that come into the context. But I will say the coaching experience, the process of coaching, uh, is different than, hey, mentorship, which is really, mentorship is, hey, here's my experiences, learn from what to do or what not to do. So kind of going back to that definition of walking alongside someone, and yes, context is helpful and important, but there's a process that's asking the right questions at the right time to push someone to think differently and find, okay, that's the nugget I needed to get. Let's move forward this direction.
Yeah, that's great. Speaking of things that you did that you thought were important, but now you know differently, what's one of those things that when you started out, you're like, hey, I should really be doing this, and now
Mm.
you've rethought how that actually works?
Yeah, the first thing I thought was important was just getting up a website that was like, oh man, as soon as I have this up, it'll be so much easier to let people know what I'm doing. And I have yet to get more than 2 clients from my website, and I've improved a lot with my website development over time. But uh, really, for what I was doing, especially as early as I was, uh, I spent a lot of time and effort setting up something that nobody was going to see.
Mm,
And so it's really understanding, okay, what does business development look like? How do I contact, the right people? How do I get in front of the right people? You're understanding who it was that I was targeting.
mm,
I was all things to all people. When I first got started, I was trying to mix coaching and consulting. Um, and I was trying to really work with anybody who had a heartbeat. And now I'm much more targeted, working with Christian entrepreneurs. And all of my messaging, all of my resources are all dedicated to that particular audience. And so there's a learning curve with narrowing down your focus to serve the people that you can help the most. And so that's a big lesson and takeaway that I wish I had learned earlier. But you have to go through the fire to get there. You really do. Oftentimes uh, it takes iterating a lot and experimenting a lot and failing a lot before you finally hit your rhythm that, okay, now I generally understand what's going on here. And 5 years from now, I'm going to be looking back at this conversation and laughing at myself because I will have grown so much from even here. So
mm.
it's just an iterative process that's constant in entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Well, saying that to someone that really cut their teeth in most of their career on building websites, so it's very hurtful. but I'll be able to go where. But you're 100% true. Not everybody, not every business, the website is the most important thing. Now, if you're an e-commerce business and you don't want to build a website, that's a problem.
Right.
But it goes
Right.
back to your audience, right? Like, who are you trying to reach and where are they at?
Yeah, exactly. And yes, this is not advice to everyone. Hey, you don't need a website, because there are many websites are great for the right audience, the right people, and the right strategy. But if I at the time I had very little audience, I had uh, very little know-how of how to get people to a website, and those are all things that I had to kind of learn over time. Uh, it it's I spent almost a month trying to figure out how to get my website up and running. Uh, just and when in reality I could have just contacted 100 people every single day, and that would have led to more business and knowledge and growth than spending that time there. So that's really what I mean by that.
Yeah. I think the principle there that, I think we've all probably found ourselves at some point is that it feels good to get something done, right? And if you don't
Yeah.
really know like what your path forward is, like, because you're early on and you're like, you know what, I know how to go sign up at Wix or, buy some business cards or, whatever. You feel like you're accomplishing something, but it's not that income producing activity if you want to think about
Right.
that, or you're not building relationships. But at the end of the day, you're like, I did something today, but it may have actually not moved the needle in all reality.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. The whole or understanding prioritization where you are in a business, what does actually move the needle. It's just a process to see or to experiment, see, test, and fail, until you really understand and grasp, what your business is.
Yeah. The key kind of title or subject matter we wanted to touch on today, it kind of leads into this because you were out kind of on your own learning what to do in the beginning. And it's this idea of being isolated as a
Hmm.
business person, right? That's what can, you know, begin to bring up some of these things where you don't have someone to be like, hey, by the way, is this a good idea? And then because you're just figuring it out, you're Googling stuff and there's a bazillion things that tell you what to do. So just this idea about, the isolation as a Christian business leader, like how do we overcome that? What's that look like?
Yeah.
So let's kind of get into that and get some of your thoughts on that challenge many people face.
Yeah, it's a pretty significant challenge, and just in general, business is a very, especially entrepreneurship, is a very isolating experience. There are very few other people in our lives that actually know what it's like to either build something from nothing or just understands the weight of making all of those decisions on a day-to-day basis. And the amount of effort and work that you're putting into your business, it really can lead to you being on a computer screen for hours at a time without being able to actually talk to anybody, just especially in today's uh, current environment. And so there's this weight, this isolation. You're alone, working all these things. The fear of, am I doing this right? Am I making the right decision? Am I working on the right things? All of these things start coming into play. And then, in particular, for a Christian who's trying to do all of these things, how do I do them in how God wants me to do this? How do I honor God with my work? Am I making all these decisions well? And so it just becomes a very fearful environment when you're isolated. You have this echo chamber, and it really does create a place where Satan can get a hold of you. It's You start listening to your own voice, and that's the only voice that you hear, or a negative voice. And so it's a pretty big problem, and something that's pretty consistent amongst the Christian entrepreneur community.
Yeah, 100%. It makes me think of, I think it's in Proverbs, and it talks about the man that isolates himself rages against all wisdom. I can't give you the
Mm,
exact, I was going to Google it while I was talking here, but I know it's in the Bible, guys, so you go find it. So That's a pretty strong statement, right? Like the guy that's backing off and trying to do
Hmm.
everything, becoming that self-made man, like my pastors often talked about that. It sounds good in theory, but like the Bible says, it rages against all wisdom. And that's, like I said, that's a strong statement.
Yeah, no, it really is. And elsewhere in the Bible, it talks about a cord of three not being easily broken, and just this the significance of strength of being in numbers. And the Bible also says when two or more are gathered in His name, God will be there. And so, combining those two of, hey, if I'm uh, am in community with other people, in particular other Christian business leaders, and we are praying together, seeking God. All of a sudden, if you start off with two, all of a sudden you now have three, and if you have more than that, then it only makes that cord or that band stronger, and protects you against the temptations, the storms, all of these things that come your way, walking through business. So it's a it's a significant problem, and while there are solutions out there, a lot of times we're so focused on our business that we kind of miss creating and dedicating time to prevent that from happening.
Yeah. And that verse that I mentioned earlier, Proverbs 18:1, a man who isolates himself seeks his own desire. He rages against all wise judgment.
Hmm.
And so that, yeah, that's it. Your own desire. You just become too self-reflective. I guess you could say
Hmm.
it's all about you and what you want to accomplish. But yeah, so kind of give us a couple of keys. And obviously some things anybody could do is go find a group of people that you're, close to that maybe you have in your local city get
Hmm.
together. But what are some other things people can do to help them with this whole isolation problem?
Yeah, I think it first starts off with starting to build a community, whether that's having just locally in your church, finding a few business leaders to have more conversations regularly, whether it's finding an online community, whether it's SheepFest, or you have Faith Driven Entrepreneur, you have Faith Tech. There are a number of different Christian business communities that have started coming out more and more. And starting off there of just let's be around these people, we're not isolated. And in-person events, personally, I think are significantly more beneficial to the soul than just online. But even online events are great too. Access to people from all over the world are incredible, and friendships that you can make online from all over the world are incredible. And so, starting off something in there of let's just be around people, and then it can kind of take a step further. You have uh, whether it's working directly with a coach and creating a more intimate relationship where somebody truly understands the depth of your experiences on a day-to-day basis, or working in a peer group, groups like Convene, C12, and other groups like that, where you're in community with a group working towards business with a faith perspective. And so really being around people. And then so that's one portion, the community piece. And then the other portion of isolation is just not spending time with God, not spending time with your Father. And how how often feeling isolated actually comes from a place of, oh, I'm not feeling isolated because I'm not in community with other people, but I'm isolated from God. And so dedicating time, creating time in your day, your week, your month to be one-on-one with God in prayer and worship, and learning about God, reading the Bible, being in community of church, which that's another side of just being in relationship with others. I think those are some of the big things that you can do to kind of tackle this isolation piece.
100%. And that's the name of this podcast, the 2000 Cubit rule. making room for God to move. This
Mm.
is a core value that we have here. And yeah, that is super important. The vertical relationship, right? We've heard
Hmm.
this said. Uh, that is the precursor to the horizontal ones that we have that you mentioned that are super important too. It's the idea of the iron sharpening iron, and all of these things are very important. And I know it's sometimes for certain personality types, like I'll raise my hand on that. I'm like, I'm pretty good with being by myself. I grew up on a farm in West Virginia. You got to walk several minutes to find somebody, or drive to find somebody my age growing up. So I kind of had that um, built in as far as like a default, like I'm kind of good by myself a lot of the time. So some of us might have to kind of break our habits of,
Yeah.
just being able to, go off and clickety click on the computer or whatever it is. So what would you say to somebody that's maybe built a little bit like me, that you just kind of find yourself, rolling with it for a good part of the time? What's something that they can kind of help them move beyond themselves?
Yeah, I think it's just starting small. You don't have to go 1,000 miles an hour. You can find one thing and just start once a month and commit to it for a couple of months and just start one thing once a month for 3 months and just commit and try it and keep it small. Do it in an hour. Don't overwhelm yourself, and then look to start building on it. Look to see, okay, what's working here. Uh, how do I feel when I am in relationship with these people? Am I starting to see some fruit from this? And then start doubling down. Maybe you go twice a month. Maybe you just increase, or you add another group or something else that allows you to keep being in relationship with people. And so one of the ways that makes it really easy to fail is to go from 0 to 1,000. Putting too much on your plate, and then all of a sudden you just drop everything. So just start small, work with one thing, and try to work with more depth than breadth. I think getting deeper into one organization generally is better than doing 25 different organizations. So that's where I would get started.
Yeah, that's biblical too, right? Little by little, precept by precept. The Bible talks about those kind of things as well. There's great wisdom there to build upon one at a time there. Um, that kind of leads me into another subject matter that we've discussed talking about as well, and that is overwhelming workload. So that's kind
Yeah.
of that's avoiding that issue, right? You're like, hey, let's do all the stuff, and you can find yourself as an entrepreneur, as a business leader, getting into too many things and having this problem. So let's kind of dive into that as well. Yeah, as you phrased it, too many things on your plate and not enough time to do it. Like,
Right.
how do people address that issue?
Yeah, great question. And I think it comes back to kind of three major buckets there. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, it's typically because you either don't know where you're going, and so you're making no progress to it. You might know where you're going, but you don't have uh, the right, or you're not working on the right things that make progress towards it. So again, you're not making progress towards that. Or you just don't have the right systems and accountability in place to ensure the right work gets done. So it's kind of the three buckets of, if I know where I'm going, I prioritize off of that work, and then I have the accountability and systems in place, you're going to be hard to stop. And so when you're overwhelmed, typically it means there's some type of misalignment there. Um, you're probably putting too much on your plate that you just don't need to work on. And so really learning how to prioritize well of what is the 1 to 2 things that I need to get done, not the 50 things that I have to get done.
Yeah, and that ties back into your own story that you talked about, like, oh yeah,
Right.
the website's super important, and then you're kind of wasting your time at that moment.
Right.
Um, so yeah, that we can all get there at some point where we feel like we have a lot to do, but we
Hmm.
just don't know. Yeah, it's that same idea of their perspective of you know everything about your business. And so there's these little things that are coming in as like, oh, I should do this and I should do that and all that. And so that's where someone like you, Jacob, can come in and assess what someone's doing. Is that something that you find that you do a good bit with the folks that you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. It's we tend to always start off with where is it that we're trying to go? Because if we don't have a North Star guiding light, whatever you want to call it, if you don't know where you're going, you're just going to end up somewhere that you don't want to be. So we've got to really have an idea, and it doesn't always have to be wildly specific, but to get started, you have to know generally where you're going. And then from there, it's asking the question, what needs to be true for this vision to actually come to reality? And so from there, that typically highlights two or three things that are like, oh, okay, if I'm going to increase my business by 25% this year, then I need either more clients, or my prices need to raise, or the costs need to be less. And so it just really highlights, okay, what has to be the thing, what are the only few levers that I need to pull to be able to actually get there? And then from that piece, it's okay, what's the specific action step you need to take so that we actually move the needle over the next 2 weeks here? So that's largely, or a lot of what I do on a week to week basis with my clients. Get clear on where we're going. All right, what are we going to work on right now, and what are the very specific, minute details that are actually knock out these milestones each week.
Beautiful. Can you give us an example of some, you don't have to tell who it is or exactly the business or
Yeah.
whatever, but just like an example of you kind of stepping in to somebody maybe that engaged you and it's kind of like a ground, we're at ground zero and you come in, you're like, all right, let's look at this. What did that look like?
Yeah. So what that would look like is typically a Christian entrepreneur who has an established business, but is either stuck kind of in the same place. And sometimes that looks like, hey, I want to scale, but I haven't been able to figure out how to do that. And so sometimes it's a mental hang up of, I know what I need to do, but I keep getting distracted. Or and yeah, we'll just use that example. And so one of my clients has recently come to me, and he has an established business, works has a number of clients that he works with. It's pretty self-sustaining at this point, but he really wants to take a step back from working day-to-day stuff, so that he can give his time and energy to either higher level work, but also serving in his church. And so he has so much to do on a day-to-day basis with his normal tasks that he can't give a lot of thought to the longer term or larger term vision. And so starting off with, okay, well, what does that longer term vision look like? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Those kind of questions really opened up the conversation to, okay, I actually want to take a step back from this day-to-day work. It would be great if, instead of working 8 to 10 hours a day on day-to-day, these day-to-day tasks, I would love to work 4 hours on those, and then give me the space to actually be with my family and enjoy life to the fullest. And so what has that led to? It's led to him choosing to hire some help to come in and take off that load from his plate. And at the same time, we've explored different pricing opportunities and things of that nature to create this space and margin in his life to go forward and kind of attack the next 10 years differently. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. Of, hey, we evaluated where we want to be. What are the paths or what needs to be true? What are the paths that we need to take to get there? And then, okay, what are you working on over the next 2 weeks? What can I check in on and make sure that those get done, so that we're making that steady progress throughout the year?
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thanks for kind of breaking that down for us.
Yeah.
One of the things that popped into mind as you were explaining that is the power of asking questions.
Mm,
And I know that's kind of, this whole idea of taking a step back because, you come in and you look at, and then questions start to come up. And I'm sure you've had training and all that as certain kind of things to ask, but you get a lay of the land and then you're like, why is he doing that? Or why are they doing this? And that sort of thing. And I think about that in, I often promote Dane and Heidi Benson's Wake Up at Work. It's a prayer journal for business people. Go get it on Amazon. It's great. But it's that whole idea of you're asking God questions, and he gives
mm.
him an opportunity to speak into you and your business. So I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on this whole idea of a power of a question and how it can really help form what we need to do, whether it's, engaging with a father or, having a one-on-one relationship with someone.
Yeah, questions are so important. It's a question that makes you pause and actually, and, it's typically not the first answer right away. It's the one that makes you sit there and say, "Oh, I need to actually chew on this for a moment." Um, and the ones that make you pause and be like, "Oh, well, my mind was thinking this direction, but is there something that I'm missing here? Should I be exploring a little bit of a different mindset or a different lens?" And I mentioned not being able to see the forest from the trees. I love walking through forests. It's one of my favorite things to do. And one of the things that is kind of interesting to do is to look really narrowed down into on a tree. And what you can do is you can actually see the ants crawling up the tree. You take a step back and then you see some vines that are also on the tree, and you see the bark, it's different. There's all kinds of things there. You just take a step a little bit further back and you see, oh, there's branches and there's leaves and there's all this. Wow, this tree is massive and it's beautiful. And you take a step further back and it's like, oh wow, there's a lot more trees around here than just this one. And so there's so many different perspectives that you can have on a situation, but when we're so attached to it, we just can't see, um, where we get stuck in our kind of our typical day-to-day stuff. And so being able to pause in a really busy life and a really busy schedule allows us to breathe and slow down and not be in this cycle of busyness and intensity. And that allows a lot more, just brain movement, and allows a lot more, um, allows you to make a different kind of decision than the heat of the moment. Oh, we've just got to keep going, guns a blazing. Um, it just allows you. It changes the way that you work when you incorporate times where you do slow down and actually see what is everything that I'm doing.
Yeah, 100%. It reminded me of the email I received this morning, and it's quoting from the message in Matthew 11:28 through 30. And I've heard this quoted from the message multiple times, but it says, "Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. Walk with me, work with me, watch how I do it." It's this whole idea of like, the whole thing of stepping back.
Mhm.
Um, you think of the phrase "go hard or go home." This is kind of like
Mhm.
business, typical business world stuff, right? You just got to grind it out and just keep going and going. And but God's obviously worked in this whole his system is there's this essential piece of rest and waiting,
Mhm.
and like I said, having these questions where you dialogue with God and of those that we've talked about already, right? In your community, you're the ones that you trust to give you great feedback. So, yeah, I love that, Jacob. Thank you for kind of bringing that out. Another thing that I kind of wanted to touch on today was this idea of the integration of faith in the business. Of
Mm.
course, we talk about that all the time here at SheepFeast, but not everybody's in the same place with that. And of course, I'm sure you run across that where some people are very strong Christians, but they don't really connect it to their workplace as much.
Mhm.
And or some are just kind of being awakened to that. And they're like, how do I do that? What's that look like? as a business owner or, just working for a business. So what are some of the things that you found in that journey?
Yeah, I think it really starts off with a hunger and a desire. There, as a believer, owning my own business, recognizing that my motivations are slightly different than or not slightly, but they're different than the world's. Of owning my own business, I am a Christian first, and so I want to represent Christ well. I want to serve Him well, and so I treat people differently than I might otherwise if I had different motivations. And it doesn't mean that you don't. Um, well, what it ultimately means is that we are serving God, not man. And so all of our best efforts that we have are ultimately to that purpose. And you just mentioned, grinding it out. And there is a certain element with entrepreneurship that you cannot avoid. You will grind out at times. However, God did design Sabbath for man, for us to get rest and abide in Him. And the Bible talks about, um, you know, you cannot bear fruit without being a part of Christ. Excuse me, about being a part of His vine. And so, in what that practically looks like is, if I want to bear fruit in my business, I cannot be separated from Christ. I cannot be separated from God. So if I want to honor God with my business, then I actually have to take the time to slow down and abide in God. And what a counterintuitive message that can be when we want to sprint and grow and triple our business, which are all good goals to have, but you can't do those things without, or you can't bear the fruit that God cares about without having Him in your life on a day-to-day basis. So practically, what does that look like? That means that you might wake up earlier. You might wake up 30 minutes earlier just to sit in prayer. You might dedicate a morning where you take a half day and you actually just go on walks with God once a month, once a quarter. It might look like, okay, I'm going to pray over my clients during lunch. It might look like, at the before you go to bed at night. Okay, I'm going to sit with my spouse and we're going to pray over this business. And so it's an integration of faith into your daily life and creating space to hear God speak. And as you draw closer to Him, as you spend more time with Him, you're more sensitive to see where God's moving in your business. So I think it starts with a recognition of a hunger and a desire as a Christian to honor God, and then it ends with that hunger leading to action of pursuing God and putting Him first before working on your business.
I concur. As we've made our journey with SheepFeast, there are just certain times where I feel like the Lord is prompting to, like, hey, you just need to, this is a day of prayer, or afternoon, like you said, there's just a time where you need to set aside more time. And sometimes that's just literally to recenter my focus, to behold Jesus and to,
Mm,
and it may not be like some amazing strategy that he drops or whatever, or a new idea. It could just be like, hey, you got to get your heart right in this
mm.
moment so we can keep moving forward. So that's like I said, the 2000 Cubit rule is all about that. It's about having margin for these things to allow God to show you, because that scripture, if you've been a listener of the podcast, you would have heard 1,000 times. But it's the point is they don't know where they're going, so they have to make room for the Ark of the Covenant, which represented the presence of God, and they follow that. And that's what we want to do in our businesses. As we follow Jesus, He'll show us which way to go. Um, yeah, so this has been already amazing, Jacob. And the one of the things that you said about, God kind of was showing you like you had to cut anchor and things were you able to, like, obviously you have the anchored name, but was there a time where he was like, all right, well you have your anchor's back on now, or kind of like to hear that piece of the story? Because it's interesting that he said, like there's a cut anchor a moment for you, but now you
I I certainly believe that God has he took my boat and he led me to a shore, and I am now back on solid ground that I really think that God placed me at. And so the challenge now is to it's almost to establish a beachhead to build something that's sustainable and grow that and kind of, I don't know, this is kind of a weird analogy, but we're just going to keep going with it. But
mm,
it's almost like, hey, I'm creating this thing that's going to exist beyond me. It's, hey, I'm establishing something new here, so that it can live and exist. And at some point, there will be somewhere else that I need to go and explore and develop. But for now, the God placed me on solid ground where He wanted me. He's establishing my steps in front of me and allowing me to establish something that's going to be beyond, or hopefully be beyond my lifetime.
yeah, that's beautiful. As you're explaining that and talking through that, it makes me think of the fact that a boat is a transportation. Now we know some people live in a houseboat, but at the same time, it's anchored to the land, right?
Right.
It's more of a mode of transportation to get you to the next thing. And like you said, there's this idea of, God has land for us all, the promised land, if you want to say that, that where we take up residence for an extended period of time and continue to build His kingdom. And so, yeah, these are these anchoring moments. You're going to be in a certain spot for a little while and get what you need, and then
Mhm.
move to the next thing. So I think that's cool to see God's journey playing out and what you're doing there and helping business folks. Also, just wanted to say we had a few with us right now. If you have a question for Jacob while we're still on this particular recording, you can drop that in the chat. Otherwise, if you're watching this on a replay and you want to get in contact with Jacob, how would they do that?
Yeah, probably the easiest way is to find me on LinkedIn. So just Jacob Dyke on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me there. I also have a newsletter called the Anchored Entrepreneur, which is just a way to get some monthly updates and content on continuing to seek God and integrate faith into your business. So yeah, those are probably the easiest ways to get in touch with me.
Yeah, excellent. So, but do you have a website? I know you talked about
I
you
do
quit.
have a website.
Okay.
Yes.
So they
It's,
can find you there too.
yes, absolutely. Yeah. Anchorcoaching.co.
.co. All right, that's great. We'll make sure those links and that information is in the show notes as it gets disseminated out. And I also wanted to give you the final word, Jacob, if there's any encouragement or just challenge that you give the folks that are listening in.
Yeah, I just thank you for having me on, Mark. It's been a blast being here. But for those listening in, I pray that God blesses you in a very particular way this week. That He reveals Himself, that He shows Himself to be who He is, and that He draws you closer this week. It is a very lonely journey building out your business, and I ask that God give you peace, comfort, and company this week, community, as you pursue Him and go forth and conquer in His name. So,
Excellent. Thanks so much for spending time with us, Jacob. It's been great to hear a bit of your story and understand more how you're helping businesses. And so we'll be keeping an eye out on LinkedIn. I live out there quite a bit to see more of what you're saying and doing, helping folks. And yeah, everybody go check out his LinkedIn profile, go to his website, get more of his wisdom, and see if he can be that part of solving your isolation issues potentially. So, for everybody, thanks for being with us, and we'll catch you next time on the 2000 Cubit Rule.